Villajoyosa is a town with many faces and a long history. Since the beginning of 2020, we have lived here, and we are going to take you on a virtual tour through this remarkable town and its history. We will start at the eastern end of the municipality and work our way westwards, sometimes along the beach, sometimes more inland, weaving through the new parts, old parts, streets and countryside. And while we are walking our way westwards, we will occasionally jump backwards and forwards in village history, which started in the early days of the Iberians when it was first settled. If you want an historical overview of Villa, we can highly recommend a visit to Villa Museo, the Museum of Villajoyosa. There you will find a chronological overview of the town's history in their permanent exhibition, The Treasures of Villajoyosa. We, on the other hand, will jump around, as I said, from the Torre del Aguillon, overlooking the beach and the tiny part of Villa called La Cala de Villajoyosa, to the tower at the other end of Villa, the Torre del Charco.
The Torre de Aguillon, high above La Cala, is a defence tower from the 16th century, built under Philip II, right at the eastern end of the municipality of Villajoyosa. It forms part of the coastal watch and warning system. Between 1500 and 1750, in the Moorish days and afterwards, these towers served to watch for fleets of Berber and Corsair pirates and to warn the villages and towns when they were spotted. These pirates raided the coasts to take people hostage with the purpose of either asking for huge ransoms or to sell them in the slave markets of Oran and Algiers. The defence of Villajoyosa consisted of 4 castles and 5 towers under the leadership of a Requeridor de la Costa, and it protected the entire region of the Marina Baixa. The Torre del Aguillon is the oldest tower. It was a very important watchtower and, together with the other towers in the region of Villajoyosa, covered almost a quarter of the coast of the Kingdom of Valencia. From here you can see to beyond Alicante and in the opposite direction as far as Calpe. 3 soldiers would watch the neighbouring bays and seas for any sign of approaching danger, and there was a long-range cannon making it difficult to disembark at either Villajoyosa to the one side or the smaller fishing village of Benidorm at the other. When there was a serious threat, towns as far inland as Alcoy and Gijona were obliged to send their urban militias to the coast to help in the defence of the fortress of Villajoyosa due to its strategic importance. High up in the Sierra Bernia, inland of Calpe, a fort was built in 1562 to raise the alarm and protect the people. However, the fort was demolished 3 years after the expulsion of the Moors in 1609, as it was too difficult and costly to maintain. From 1829 to 1940, the tower was used by the Carabineros to guard the coast and prevent smuggling. Close to the tower, quarters were built for them, and although the buildings still exist, they are now derelict. Leaving the Torre de Aguillon, a path follows the cliff and brings you to the eastern calas of Villa. The views are spectacular and you can overlook the entire coastline all the way towards the western tower, the Torre de Charco, at the other end of the municipality and beyond. Looking carefully, you can see in the distance the Torre del Barranc de Aigües, which formed part of the border between the kingdoms of Valencia, Aragon and Castilla. Those who have visited Busot will know the castle there that formed part of the same border defence. A few kilometres further on, we reach the beach, the Playa de Torres.
The Playa de Torres is one of the many beaches of Villajoyosa. There are 14 in total, and this one is quite special because it is one of the few beaches with a lot of trees. There are mostly eucalyptus trees, and on warm summer days they give very welcome shade. The beach is about 3 kilometers from the actual town of Villa, and every time we have been there it has been quiet. The Mediterranean Sea looks different every day, but on a windy day a visit to Playa de Torres is particularly recommendable. The view on the blue turquoise waters and the white surf can be almost mesmerizing. About 100 meters inland from the Playa de Torres you find the Torre de San Josep. We go back in time here, from the days of the Kingdom of Valencia to Roman times. The Torre San Josep is one of the main Roman archaeological icons in the Comunidad Valenciana, and there are only 3 towers like this on the entire Iberian Peninsula. This Torre de San Josep, the Torre de los Escipiones in Tarragona, and the Torre Ciega in Cartagena. Actually, they are not towers at all, at least not to watch out over the sea like the many watchtowers. It is a funeral monument, and this one dates probably from the 2nd century. Monuments like these mostly were situated along roads, like the majority of the Roman tombs. But the Torre San Josep is an exception, for it seems the monument was built in a way to see it not from any road or path over land, but from the first way of travelling during ancient times, from the sea. The tower is situated on top of a slope on the coast, in the Cala de Torres, in such a way that it stood out in the landscape when you approached it from the sea. From 2012, guided tours are organized by Villa Museo and the local part of the Asociación Hispania Romana, the 9th Spanish Legion. You may have seen this group of volunteers perform on the Arsenal beach in Villa or on their walk along the Ruta de la Paz, passing Orcheta and Relleu a few years ago. I remember how the former mayor of Relleu, Santiago, was being dressed as a Roman senator during a conference in the town hall of Relleu. The tower has no entrance. You cannot go in. Why would you? After all, it was a funeral monument. However, like nowadays people bring flowers to the cemeteries and graves at All Saints' Day, in Roman times the family did bring offerings to the deceased, especially wine, which was poured into the tower through 2 holes in the walls. You can still see these holes. Although it has recently been named the Torre Hercules, after one of the latter owners, in earlier days the name was Torre Josep, and for a long time Josep was thought to have been another owner. However, it is suggested that the name could have derived from the name Josa. During the Middle Ages, the Valenciano name for Villajoyosa, La Villajoyosa, was frequently shortened to the form Villajosa, so the monument might have been named after the town, the Torre de Josa. From there, over time, it changed into the Torre Josep.
We make a jump of about 3 kilometres west at this point, because initially what is now the old town was just below what was then the fortified town area of Villa. The Playa Arsenal beach, at this time rock and shingle, was the main centre for the maritime trade, with both fishing and commerce being important along with shipbuilding. It is probable that the rock groin extending out from where the Rio Amadoreo enters the sea was constructed to protect this relatively exposed zone from the weather, and may well be a very early feature. Seeing the area today, it is hard to imagine that the ground floor of the houses would have been used as storage, and nets laid out along the streets being repaired by the fishermen's wives. Another link with this maritime past is the presence of a street named after St. Elmo, a traditional patron saint of sailors and seafarers. Shipbuilding dates back to at least the 14th century, and early in the 15th century the largest cargo ship of the Kingdom of Aragon, the Santa Ana, was built here. We were both amazed to learn at a presentation given in Relleu Town Hall a few years ago that at this time Villa was the 2nd most important naval shipyard in Spain. It's even possible that some of the ships of the Spanish Armada could have been built on Villa Beach. Construction of wooden-hulled ships continued during the following centuries, But the problem with the Playa Arsenal was that as the ships got larger, they needed deeper water to launch them. And in 1918, the 400-ton Damiana ran aground after being launched from the Vicente Solar shipyard. As a result, he moved his yard to the Playa Varadero, the first of the Playa Estudiantes beaches, and his son, Bartolomé Solar, the monk, continued the family business with the Bartolomé Zaragoza shipyard only closing in 1984. In the early 20th century, a rich trading family, the Centellas, more of them later, commissioned the construction of two schooners, the Centella and the Jonense, which were both built in the Monjo shipyard of Villa. This shipyard was also one of the first to move to the new location of the Playa Varadero and was still active until almost the end of the 20th century. The move away from the Playa Arsenal prompted the development of what is now the modern port and marina. Initially planned in 1917, the East Dock was constructed between 1921 and 1940, and it became the main centre for both shipbuilding and repair. A barrage was built along with the Santa Marta dry dock and port area, which is still in use. Finally, the Western Dock, complete with marina, was opened in 1964. This was a great boost to the fishing industry, which was still an important part of the town's economy, and in 1963 the fleet comprised 68 trawlers. A black and white photograph in the Villa Museum looking west towards the old town shows the beach with fishing boats, and in the distance a large lighthouse close to the present Alon Hotel. This was apparently destroyed in a single stormy night. We've not been able to get an accurate date for this, but it has been suggested that it was probably during the 1940s. That such a relatively large structure could be destroyed in a single night shows the risks associated with the early shipbuilding on the beach and the importance of the new harbour area.
The opening of the new port area in the 1960s coincided with the beginning of the growth of tourism in Spain, especially the costas, and soon the coastal strip between the Playa Arsenal and the new harbour area began to develop. In fact, it had already become a fashionable place to live, now that the days of pirate raids, etc. were long gone, and many lovely houses had been constructed, sadly most of which have now vanished to be replaced by hotels and apartment blocks. The first tourist project of Villa dates back to the mid-19th century with the development of the Paseo de las Delicias in 1907, becoming the Paseo José María Escuedo. A photograph from the 1930s shows the avenue flanked with palm trees, which have been a feature throughout its several remodelings. Another early venture into this new market was the construction of the Neptune bathhouse in 1950, which survived until the 1960s. This was a remarkable structure, built on a pier extending from the shingle beach, complete with restaurant and terrace. A more recent photograph from 1966 shows a very dilapidated old town and beach area, but already at that time, further along the front, towards the new port, multi-story buildings are springing up. Probably the biggest change came in 1991, when during the winter the central beach changed its narrow and stony shore for a wide sandy beach, soon copied by adjacent areas to become one of Villa's main tourist attractions. I have read that many guidebooks consider it the best beach of the Costa Blanca, and it is a fact that even at the height of the season, this beach can be relatively peaceful. A walk along the seafront from the old town area to the port is a wonderful promenade, with great views, pedestrian-friendly, and bars and restaurants from cheap and cheerful to gourmet. Then, reaching the port, we see the other success story, with many very smart and expensive pleasure boats. Plus, of course, every evening the return of the fishing fleet, proving this is still very much a commercial port. On the subject of beaches, we have to mention two other popular locations. Playa Paradis, a popular sandy beach some 2 kilometers west of the town, and the sand here was also probably imported, and Bolnau, one of our favorites. This is a shingle beach in a small bay backed by very steep, unstable cliffs, protected against rockfalls by mesh, relatively quiet, and with a pleasant beach bar open during the summer.
The river Amadoreo flows into the sea just west of the old town, and a lovely park has been created in the steeply sided valley between here and the bridge carrying the CN 332 over the valley. Looking up towards the old fortified town, we see a mass of brightly coloured houses literally clinging to the valley side. On the eastern bank, another steep slope rises to El Barrio Marinero, Pueblo Nuevo. The bridge was constructed in 1878, and previously crossing the river had involved a steep descent and ascent, which had been the only way across since Roman times, the alternative being a detour to crossing points further upriver. It is one of the oldest bridges on the Alicante-Valencia road. El Camino de Calvario was opened at the same time, giving access to the Salud Chapel and later a cemetery, railway station, and in the mid-20th century the industrial area around the station and the rural and urban areas northwest of the town. You may have wondered why the tram station in the centre of Villa is called La Crueta, not Villajoyosa, and the reason for this is that the railway from Alicante originally terminated on the western side of the Amadoreo, and this was the original Villajoyosa station. In 1915, a year after the line was opened, the rail bridge was finally completed, allowing trains to continue towards Denia, its intended terminus. Like the road bridge, this bridge is a spectacular feat of engineering. Following the line of the river upstream from the tram line, a smaller valley joins from the left, after which the very steep banks of the main valley continue. Looking at these, we can appreciate what an impressive natural barrier the valley forms. Some 1.5 kilometres further up the valley, we come to a third old bridge, the Puente de Salt den Hill. This is one of the oldest bridges in the Villa area, dating back to the 18th century. However, documents, some as old as the 15th century, refer to a structure at this location, and it has even been suggested that an even older structure existed, which was itself rebuilt at that time. On the road to this bridge from La Ermita, there is a massive rock, La Roca Encanta, which has a lot of legends associated with it, and nearby is the very old olive tree, La Olivera Grossa, that Lindsay spoke about in her talk last month. Continuing upstream, we pass beneath the AP7 and into a more rural area before reaching the swimming pool and Villa Rugby Club, which has a long and successful tradition in rugby sevens. Our walk ends just up the river from here at the spectacular Embalse de Amadoreo. I've lived in this area for nearly 11 years, but only recently visited while researching this talk, but we will certainly be returning. It looks like great walking country and has spectacular views from mountains to sea.
Going back to the coast, we pass the small barrio of La Ermita, which is part of La Villa. A few streets around a church, it forms a small community by itself. It seems the smaller the community, the more saints are needed. La Ermita has an impressive 6 patron saints. Abdon and Senem are the saints of the hill. San Antonio protects the animals. Saint Michael the Archangel is the main saint, and, like in Relleu, there are also Cosme and Damian, the 2 physician saints. But although it is small, La Ermita boasts one building everyone is proud of. In 1909, Álvaro Esquerdo, one of 2 brothers who both were doctor, founded the first public school in La Villa, here in La Ermita, where he was born. with a classroom for boys and one for the girls, rooms for the teachers, and also a place for the priest, who obviously had his part in the education of the kids. Leaving La Ermita and returning to the town proper, almost the first buildings you see are the factory and museum of Chocolate Valor. Valor produces top-quality chocolate in Spain, together with the factories of Pérez and Clavileño. And Villa is proud that all three of them are based in its town. Incredibly, the Spaniards kept the discovery of cocoa a secret from the rest of Europe for almost a century. And the cocoa was brought to Villa in the 17th century. Villa became the pioneer of chocolate production, partly because of its prominent position as a shipbuilding place, with ships going all over the world, trading the products from towns like Alcoy worldwide and bringing back specialties like cocoa pods. Since the discovery, the Spanish have been obsessed with the drink, and they loved it so much that at one point the Pope was asked to change the rules regarding fasting to exclude chocolate. To this day, chocolate is a standard breakfast drink, and chocolate con churros is a very popular breakfast around Spain. In the Middle Ages, a Knight Templar by the name of Juan Aragonés, friend of the Valencian king Jaume I, became owner of extended lands around Villajoyosa. From the 13th century onwards, the family lived in Villa, and in the 16th century they built a huge house, La Barbera dels Aragonés. On the ground floor were the quarters of the servants. The family lived on the first floor, and the second floor was what is called a riorau, an open space, well ventilated, that was used to dry grapes and turn them into raisins. You can see many of these rioraus in the area of the Marina Alta, but this one in Villa is the most southern one and the only one here in the region of Marina Baixa. The tower is to watch over the lands and served to warn whenever an attack of pirates or later bandoleros was expected. The last family member died in 1992, and since 2005 the house is part of the museum Villa Museo. The area around the house was turned into a municipal park, and during the summer the town hall organizes almost weekly concerts and events in the open-air auditorium. Last summer we went to several of them. Once you know where to find the information in time, which sometimes isn't that easy in Spain. But it is always a very pleasant experience, sitting outside on a warm summer's night, enjoying music and dance. The Calle Colón is the main street of Villa, and has been so since 1867. The same Dr. Álvaro Escuero, who founded the first public school in La Ermita, founded another one here in Villa, in the Calle Colón. The building has been restored and now forms Villa Museo, Villa's museum. The museum has an amazing exhibition about the history of Villa from the Bronze Age till modern times. It is a must to visit it, and even if you have been there before, when you go back for a second time or even a third time, you will still be surprised about how much you have missed the first times. Many grand and beautiful houses have been built along the Calle Colón, and one still stands out. It is now the tourist office. The house was built by Vicent Lloret Centella, and it is a mix of styles, Art Nouveau, Classic and Oriental. Since 1870, the Centella family sold fresh fish loaded on mules to the inland areas. They could only do this in winter, when they used the snow from the snow wells in the mountains to keep the fish fresh. In summer, they switched to selling salted fish. As you heard earlier, the Centellas had 2 schooners that travelled the world, and from their voyages they brought back exotic species that were planted in the garden of the Centella villa. Amongst these plants are the two impressive trees that stand in front of the tourist office. When you walk around in the villa, notices provide information about its history. Vestiges of the Romans seem to be everywhere. A few hundred meters from the tourist office, you can discover a plaque on the pavement with the word fossa on it. This indicates the site of a Roman camp from the 1st century that they have found. There are several of these plaques to indicate where the ditch around the camp used to be. At the end of the Calle Colón, close to the river, is Café Mercantil, the oldest café of Villa. It is small and features a drink that is unique for Villajoyosa and famous in the province of Alicante and elsewhere. Spanish sometimes call the drink alucinante, metaphorically speaking, is called El Nardo Villero. Where does this name come from? It was the year 1956, and Café Mercantil was at that time managed by Jaime Lloret and his son Luis. During the summer of that year, Gloria Lasso, a famous actress and singer, was performing in the capital of Alicante in a play, a zarzuela, called La Blanca Doble. Juan Segreyes, also called El Blanc, the White, Paco Marcet, Jaime Pérez, named Melpe, Pere La Cuarteta, and Don Juan, El Contable, the accountant, were a group of friends, all living in La Villa, and they were eager to go to Alicante and watch the performance of this artist. So they crossed the railway bridge to the train station at the other side of the Rio Amadorio. The first stone for the train station was laid in 1911 by King Alfonso XIII, and it was the start of the first phase of the strategic railways plan in the entire Spain. 2 months later, the king granted La Villa the title of city, and the inauguration of the train station was in 1914. Over the years, the steam train of the early days has been replaced, first by a small diesel train that everybody called El Tren Blau, the blue train. And nowadays it is a comfortable train that brings you to the heart of Alicante in less than an hour. However, at the time of our group of friends, it was still the old steam train that they had to take, and it took them undoubtedly much longer than an hour. At their return from the capital, probably the following day, they decided to have a refreshment in their usual bar, Café Mercantil. The refreshment consisting of iced coffee and absinthe, and it wasn't just the one. Still excited by the lively time they had spent in Alicante, and with another refreshment in the hand, they started singing the song Los Nardos, while at the same time they continued drinking. From that day onwards, their request to the barman always was, "Give me another Nardo, caballero." The name Nardo Villero was born. From here, we leave the new town, crossing the 332, and find ourselves back on the seafront.
On the beach near the old town stands a statue of José María Izquierdo, not to be confused with Álvaro Izquierdo, the one who founded the first public schools. This one was a famous and much-loved psychiatrist and politician, so much so that they built a statue which was originally placed in the Plaza de la Constitución at the top of the old town. In 1936 it was moved to the beach near the house where he was born and where a promenade was named after him. We will hear more about him later on. After the Romans had left their town of Alon, and when the Moors occupied most of Spain, the town lost its importance. This changed when slowly the Christian kings reconquered territory from the Moors. In 1301, Bernard de Sarria, councillor to the King of Aragon, became the lord of what was then called the New Town. He built a castle, of which nothing remains but some drawings, that formed the basis for a maqueta you can find in the old quarters. He also gave this new town a new name, La Villajoyosa, the Happy Town. The beach below the walls of the old town is called El Arsenal. This is the beach where the boats were built, and it was the centre of the fisherman community. I think everyone knows the urban legend as to why the houses in the old town of Villa are all so colourful. When out at sea, the sailors could look back to the town and recognise their houses by the various colours. It is said that sometimes a sheet was hung out of the window of the sailor's house in case of a disaster or calamity, so that he would see from a distance that something was amiss. The beach is also the place where the famous disembarkation takes place during the fiesta of the Moors and the Christians. Countless towns in Spain celebrate these fiestas every year, but the one in Villa is famous for the scenes of the disembarkation of the Moors and Berber pirates from their ships at the first ray of the sun on the 28th of July to meet the archers and swords and pitchforks of the Christians defending the town. This is to commemorate the battle of 1538, when Zale Arraiz led the Moors for a raid on the town, but the town was defended by its inhabitants and saved, according to another legend, by Santa Marta. These raids showed the importance of Villajoyosa being a fortified town. The work started with the fortifying of the church and the old town built around these fortifications. In the end, the houses of the sailors were surrounded by an entire wall with 2 gates to enter the town. As we mentioned earlier, Villa was of strategic importance, and when attack was expected, cities as far inland as Alcoy and Gijona were obliged to send troops to help with the defence of the town and the coast. Because of her help in the battle against the Moors, Santa Marta became the patron saint of Villa, and, like with many saints, a miracle is attributed to her. In 1653, on the 8th of May, the statue of Santa Marta in the church in the old town cried for 2 hours. A notary was summoned to the church to make an official record of this miracle. Coincidentally, this was the same day as King Philip IV authorised the construction of a dam in Relleu, providing a reliable water supply for Villa and irrigation of the lands. For Villa, this was a godsend, and the population of the town rose quickly from 1,700 to 4,200 people, turning Villa into an important town and the capital of the region of Marina Baixa. As the centuries passed, the old town of Villa slowly fell into decay, particularly with the rise of the new town, the area of the Calle Quilon, wider streets, bigger houses and more shops. The old quarters became more and more derelict, mostly occupied by poor people and gypsies. The Plaza de la Constitución, once the heart of the town, where the Court of Justice was and where the statue of Izquierdo stood, became more and more dilapidated. However, over the last 20 years or so, Villa has realised what a gem its old town actually is. And the houses are now restored, the narrow streets cleaned up, the tiny parks refurbished, and where the renovation is still going on, the old walls used for amazing street art. The promenade is full and lively again, not with fishing nets and boats, but with bars and restaurants, parasols, and in the evening, strolling villeros, making their paseo when the day starts to cool a bit.
Again we make a jump in time and return to the early days of La Villa. As we said in the beginning, the first settlers were the Iberians, and they lived in the area of the old town, although they didn't turn it into a town like the one you can see here. When the Romans came, they settled at the same spot, and in the 1st century the town extended rapidly and became one of the 4 major Roman towns of the area, with Elche, Alicante and Denia. The town grew in importance and the roads were widened, and while the rich Romans lived in villas in the surrounding lands with their livestock and slaves, the common people, the merchants and the soldiers had their residence in the town itself. Like in many other towns, the Romans liked their baths, and they built public baths in La Villa as well. Nowadays you cannot see much of it, but these pictures from the museum, made when the excavations were going on, show them in all their glory. The baths were just outside the old town, close to where the Roman camp was, and you can imagine the soldiers enjoying their baths to relax after warm and sweaty trainings on the beach. We follow the road inland. The road goes to the mountain range of Alcoy, passing Orchetta and Relleu, and has been used ever since, in later centuries, using mules to bring the snow from the mountains and take the fish inland. The road crosses another important road, leading to Denia to the east and to Alicante to the west. Close to this crossing, an important cemetery was found a few years ago, with tombs of both Iberians and Romans. The Romans had the custom of burying their dead at both sides of the main roads. It was a way to remember the ones who had died. You could walk along and say to your companion, "Hey, do you remember Antonius? Wasn't he a nice guy?" And over there is the tomb of Lucretia. I fancied her a lot when I was young. This picture, however, shows a very unusual tombstone, and it wasn't found along a road, but on the remains of a Roman villa. The name Voconia Macedonia is written on it. She was 26 years and 5 months old when she died, the inscription reads, and she was a slave girl. She must have meant a lot to her owner to have her own grave with her own tombstone on private property. We stay with the Iberians and the Romans a little while longer and cross the railway bridge, which is exactly the place where the Iberians and Romans crossed the Rio Amadoreo, as you can see on this map displayed in the southern part of Villa. In 2000, a part of the 332 was moved to make space for new apartment buildings. As part of the archaeological excavations carried out prior to the construction of these buildings, the old Roman road to Alicante was found, at 1.5 meters below street level. Part of it was very well preserved, and the town hall decided to dismantle a part of it and then reconstructed it at the current street level. The reconstruction finished in 2020, and a wall painting was added to give an impression of how it would have looked walking there in ancient times. No apartments, no seaside resorts. An empty road leading through an empty land all the way to El Campello and Alicante. However, we won't follow that road, but we will make a detour to a special site on the coast, La Maladetta.
The Maladetta Tower is a very famous landmark between where the Amadoreo flows into the sea and the Playa Paradis. However, the promontory on which it stands has a far longer history, going back to at least the Iberian period and probably the Bronze Age or earlier. The Iberian sanctuary dates from 375 to 350 BC and was probably dedicated to the Diosa Madre, whom the Carthaginians called Tanit. In the year 100 BC, important changes were made, including the construction of a new series of rooms which covered the older structures. Over the last few years, 9 rooms at the west side of the hill have been excavated and 5 at the east side, but a major part of the settlement has yet to be excavated. At the beginning of the Roman period, around 25 BC, the rooms were abandoned, but on the summit of the hill there continued to be some form of temple or shrine. Around 80 AD, the sanctuary was completely abandoned and the cult, probably now Romanized, moved to the new forum in Villa itself, which by that time had been declared a Roman municipium by the Emperor Vespasian. Like other Iberian sanctuaries, at every equinox you can watch the sunrise at a specific point, here just at the right side of the island of Benidorm. This phenomena served to calculate the beginning of the agricultural year, vital for the cycles of cultivation of the lands. The Maladetta Tower belonged to José María Esquerdo Zaragoza, who was a famous psychiatrist at the end of the 19th century. He was born in Villa on the 1st of February 1842, but was orphaned when he was just 1 year old. He was educated, along with his 7 brothers, by his uncle, the priest Juan Zaragoza. Esquerdo introduced, with a group of colleagues, the science of neuropsychiatry to Spain. On the 20th of May 1877, he founded a psychiatric hospital in Carabanchel in Madrid for mental patients, and it was an innovative concept aimed at giving maximum comfort to the patients, which was quite unique at that time, as mental patients were a marginalised group within society. During the summer months, patients who were able to travel, at that time a very, very difficult, were taken to a sanatorium he had built in 1905 near the Playa Paradis in Villa. The aim was to give the patients occupational therapy by letting them work in the land around the sanatorium, another example of his very modern approach to psychiatry. Pictures of the sanatorium show 2 quite spectacular buildings, one for men and one for women. Records suggest that these continued to be in use long after his death, and at the end of the Civil War, part of the Swedish-Norwegian hospital in Alcoy was moved to the sanatorium at Playa Paradis, following the bombardment of Alcoy by Italian planes. They were located close to where the Setla station is today, but all evidence of them has long since vanished. On top of the hill, overlooking the lands that he owned and where his patients resided during the summer months, he also built the Maladetta Tower for private use as a study and library. Apart from being a famous psychiatrist, he was also politically active, and in 1895 he became the leader of the Progressive Republican Party, and he remained politically active for the rest of his life. He died in Madrid on the 30th of January 1912, and soon after his death the Progressive Republican Party was dissolved. When we moved to Villa last year, we were surprised to see on the other side of the 332 what looked like a small castle. It was obviously not ancient nor intended for defence, but seemed similar in style to some of the Victorian castles found as country houses in England, a sort of folly but with a practical purpose. Only recently, while collecting information for this tour, did we discover its history, and it turns out that the castle was built by none other than José María Esquerdo Zaragoza as his residence while in Villa.
La Villa Giacomina, the ruins close to the tower, was constructed in 1920 in neo-medieval style by Dr. Alfonso Esquerdo on the lands that he had inherited from his uncle José María Esquerdo, the psychiatrist. Alfonso Esquerdo was born in Villa but had emigrated to Argentina, where he met his wife, Giacomina Bellamy. The villa is named after her, and they lived there until 1922, the year Esquerdo died. At the end of the Civil War, the villa was the residence of Dr. Bastos, head of traumatology of the hospital in Alcoy, when his patients were relocated to the nearby sanatorium. After the Civil War, the villa was occupied by the Italian division Littorio, resulting in major damage to the structure of the building. Southwest of the beach of Bolnau, there isn't much, apart from tortuous dirt roads leading to the lands of El Campello and Alicante. Archaeologists called this area the Frontier Desert, as for many centuries this was border territory, probably as far back as the Bronze Age. Even in Roman times there was just the road to Alicante, and in later centuries little changed. Following the Reconquista, it formed the border between the Kingdom of Valencia and Aragon and the Kingdom of Castile. Later, in the 16th century, the Kingdom of Valencia and Aragon had become part of the new Kingdom of Castile and Aragon, and at this time attacks by the Berber pirates along this section of the coast intensified. King Philip II had a new watchtower built to support the northeastern Torre del Aguillon, the Torre del Charco. This tower is out of sight of the main towers, but the impressive rock on which it stands makes it a good defensive position, and it also covers an important access point to the interior. It was the most western defense tower of the Valencia region, and it is where the municipality of Villajoyosa ends. Marking the western end of the Villa municipality, it is also the end of our walk between two towers.